Hi everyone, and welcome to another exciting episode of the GCS Connect Leaders Series. We've got Maryse Gordon from RepRisk today, talking through her career, the subjects that really interest her and the areas that she kind of specialises in. So without further ado, here's Maryse. Hi Maryse, good morning to you.
Oh, good morning to you too.
How are you today?
Doing really good. I've had a very pleasant weekend, so I'm feeling on top of the moon today. By Wednesday, I might feel a little bit off, but I'm doing all right for
now. Fantastic. I was just saying to yourself, I've just returned from a week in St. Ives where I didn't get blown away, so that was all good. So I'm one of those Monday mornings where you have to catch up and all your emails and try and work out what the hell's been going on while you've been away. But fortunately, I've got a good team around me and everything seems to be fine. They don't really need me after all. So yeah, good stuff. So welcome to the Leaders Series podcast. For our listeners, we have Maryse Gordon with us today from RepRisk. She is the Partnership and Business Development Manager. And RepRisk are a company that use data and technology to consult on ESG, which is obviously environmental, social and governance. Before we kind of go into the real detail on it, Maryse, tell us a bit about yourself. Obviously, it's great to have you here and great to find out a bit more about yourself. So yeah, I'm quite interested in the context of companies you've worked with. And I know this is quite a new job for you. So and you've just recently returned back to London from New York as well. So lots going on in your life, I guess.
So much happening in my life. I feel like I'm finally landing on my feet. But yeah, so as you said, Maryse Gordon, I'm from London, having just spent 6 years in good old United States. I was based out in New York for a little while. My background, I guess, is in the space of technology and computer science. And that was what I studied at university. I did half a degree in that and half a degree in performing arts, and it does make sense, I promise you.
We don't get a lot of people with that combination, so yeah, no. Interesting.
I think I was the only university that did it, and then I was the only one who actually did it at the university. I feel like, when you're in a client-facing role and you have like a technology and kind of software background, they do lend themselves really well together to kind of getting in front of clients and articulating problems and solutions and stuff. So it did make sense eventually. So yeah, my kind of history from a career perspective, as part of my university degree, I did a year's placement at Hewlett Packard. So I was a software developer there for a year, went back and finished my degree, and then I started off at Logica, which is now called CGI. And again, I was introduced there as a software developer, and I kind of moved my way through the organization into product management, training, and then I hit pre-sales, which is then what's kind of like propelled me into this space that I'm in at the moment. So pre-sales, consulting, and business development. In 2011, I believe, I moved to the London Stock Exchange, where I spent the last 10 years. And there I was in the capacity of regulation and technology and reporting. And I was a pre-sales consultant there. I moved over to New York for 6 years. And again, was doing business development and pre-sales in that capacity, like looking at specifically the US region. And the last 2 years of my time at the stock exchange, I was in the space of data and analytics, and that's where I kind of landed on ESG as a subject and sustainable finance. And that's where I kind of like decided this is where my career is going, and that's what I've started to do now. And I joined RepRisk in December last year.
Fantastic. And as a leader, one of the things that's quite interesting, obviously, some incredible brands there in London Stock Exchange, and we talk a lot within our business, and we see obviously people moving about, those kind of international moves. That's obviously quite a big kind of risk to take. But do you think it has helped your kind of career to move forward? Do you think it has kind of helped you to develop as a leader?
Oh, absolutely. I think any type of international experience, whether it be from just travel, like learning from a cultural perspective about different people, or whether you're actually, inside a business context, you're always going to learn and you're always going to benefit from that new situation. So I think, I was able to really understand the nuances of international business, how you engage with clients, how you develop products versus how that's done in somewhere like the United States, particularly when there's so many different laws and regulations, and you can cross literally a street and be in another country, and they have totally different, not country, states, sorry, and being have totally different views in the way that they operate and the way that they even think about things like ESG, right? So that experience for me has been incredible, and I definitely think it's helped propel me. You know, anytime you're able to add more different types of perspective and visions to what you're trying to do, I think that can only benefit. And one of the things I really, you know, worked on quite a lot, which I think we're probably going to talk about, is around diversity and inclusion. So being someone who lived and grew up in the UK and then moved over to the US and really understood like what that social dynamic will look like as a Black woman there, for example, versus where I came from, again, can only add to, you know, how you learn and how you approach life. So yeah, I think it has really helped me in my career.
Do you think, you know, talking about diversity, do you think that obviously the experience is quite different, but do you think that there's quite a lot of conversation when they talk about the kind of the Black experience? Like, do you think it's quite different in the UK to the US? Do you see that, or do you think it's generally the same? I've got my own opinion, but it's not really kind of my experience. So I'm just interested to know, really. So.
No, it is totally different. I think just the way that society, I mean, you know, racism does exist everywhere. Like, I don't think I've ever been anywhere in the world and not really seen it. So it's an unfortunate reality of life. And it's something that as a Black individual, you know, I think places like the UK, like it exists, but it's not as evident, like it's not as in your face as it is in the US. And I think that was the first time for me where I really generally felt like I was being treated as a Black person, or I was in an environment where being Black was like a totally different experience. And it may be that I was just more conditioned in the UK, like I'd grown up here, and you know, I don't believe I really faced racism. You know, there's definitely adversity that comes throughout life, but I never really kind of had that at the front of my mind in situations where I'd failed or something hasn't gone wrong. Like, that wasn't an automatic reaction. But I can see that being the case in the US, that, you know, you know that things aren't going to happen because of the color of your skin. You know that certain things are going to be targeted to you because of the color of your skin. You've got a lot of this issue regarding, you know, police brutality and stuff like that. Like, that's constantly in your face. And I was in the US at the time of the George Floyd murder, and again, that was like a totally surreal experience, because you're part of a community, but you weren't part of that community. So you just feel like this very kind of lost space where you're being impacted by something that you've only just involved yourself in. You can run off and go back to the UK, but this is the reality of a lot of people in this space. So yeah, I definitely do think it is a total different mindset and lived experience to be there as a Black individual. Then
yeah, and I think it's really interesting. I've lived in a few different countries, and you know, I've lived in France, I lived in Spain, I lived in America for a while, I lived in the UK. You know, and coming from my perspective, you see how, like, you know, different groups, etc., do kind of interact together very differently. And like you said, something like the police or something like that is a very different way of being, isn't it? Like they police in a very different way, don't they? You know.
Yeah, so well, even the citizens like can carry a gun. I don't know. I don't know. Like that's totally different, right? That's a totally
that's a kind of game changer from the start, isn't it? So
yes, exactly.
Yeah. So obviously you've recently kind of come back to London and obviously starting in a new organisation. Has that presented any kind of particular kind of challenges to yourself as a leader? I mean, I don't know if you have many kind of people within your team, so you're kind of leading people, or you're working with clients as well. So has that presented any particular challenges?
Not as yet. I mean, I've only been there 3 months, so the first challenge is always like the learning curve, right? Like, you've got to come into this organization. For me, I was also coming back to my home country as well, so I was like, you know, trying to re-embed myself into British society. But alongside that, I'm learning about this new organization. I'm also learning about a new business remit as well. And then I'm also in this new subject of, I guess, sustainable finance, like deeply embedded into that. So there's a lot of learning that kind of has to come from that. And I think when you've been somewhere for 10 years and you know a lot and you know a lot of people and you can get things done and you can kind of worm your way through different situations, to start that all over again is quite a challenge, I think. Like, you've got to really remember that you also started from probably nothing when I first got to the stock exchange, and I did some really great things. I learned a lot, and I was able to I was shown that I was capable of learning and achieving good things. So you have to kind of keep that in the front of your mind when you're embedded into this new environment and you're starting from scratch again, but you have all these skills to kind of like prop you up and allow you to succeed. So that's the challenge that I've had so far, I think, is just kind of like the learning and kind of, I guess, reestablishing yourself from the beginning and seeing where you're trying to head to.
And working with your organization, are you mostly kind of hybrid, or do you work are you going into the office, or?
So I am a remote worker. However, I do have access to shared office spaces, so I'm using that at the moment, because otherwise I don't know, I don't think I'm very good at home working, to be honest. So I think getting up, having a shower, getting out of the house, brushing all those things, they kind of help set you up for the day. I'm going to do something productive today, so I use that, but it is a bit of a hybrid role. I probably have one day at home. My company is based out in Zurich, so I'm going to hopefully be traveling there a fair bit as well, to like kind of work and collaborate with colleagues too.
Fantastic. Because I guess as well that seeing colleagues and being with colleagues in your first few months is also kind of very important, isn't it? I would think. Yeah,
definitely. I finally made it over to Zurich not last week, the week before. And it's so different, like when you're kind of engaging with people in this small little screen, whether on your phone or your iPad or whatever it may be, you don't really kind of, you don't know how tall they are. That's a game changer sometimes. But you also don't really pick up a lot of their like tendencies and their personality, because you're in this confined space for a limited period of time. So going over there, and I was like, oh wow, like I kind of really got to learn more about who my colleagues were, and it does kind of really help the dynamics and the kind of like personal relationship building being in person. But we've all had to adapt to this screen digital phase, and it's probably going to stay that way. But I do think that human interaction is still going to be needed for sure.
So as you build this out, I mean, I think it's probably good to kind of just to understand a little bit more about your role and what RepRisk does. But what are your kind of main priorities for this year, kind of going forward?
So from a business perspective, I work in the space of partnerships and business development. So my remit is looking specifically at different organizations that we may not have tapped into in the past. I think we've always been very much aligned and associated with financial services. But as we can tell, everyone in the world is really looking at the space of ESG. So where can we get into new industries and new types of engagements that will help kind of expand the reach of ESG data and technology, but also allow for more innovation and product development as well. So I'm looking for those types of like strategic opportunities. One, to expand the reach of RepRisk data, but also to maybe look at ways that we can maybe bring research and development and bring new products to market too.
Yeah, so an interesting thing. I guess that's kind of linking into networking, linking into getting the name out there, building up the profile, isn't it?
All of that really, and one of they're obviously a Zurich-based organization. They have heavy presence in the Philippines, but there are specific regions that are now seeing significant growth, and one of those is the UK. So me physically being here as well is going to help with that growth of the organization in this region too.
Fantastic. So kind of going forward, if you're an organization, because we're talking about RepRisk as an organization services, what sort of, for those who don't really understand, what sort of things would I be talking to RepRisk about? What sort of kind of decisions would RepRisk be helping me to make?
The company's data set is purely looking at risk management and risk mitigation. So it's very much used in the sense of doing due diligence on entities or projects or whatever engagements you may have, to see how that would impact ESG and how that impacts reputational risk, financial risk, etc. So, you know, the types of conversations, I guess the space of ESG is very broad, it's very diverse. You know, there's so many different avenues that you can kind of focus on. But once you've kind of set out what that strategy is, one aspect of that is looking for opportunities, the other is looking at the risk and how to mitigate that. So we're looking at it from that side. So where you're trying to do due diligence on, you know, yourself and as an organization, or maybe your clients, maybe you're looking at your supply chain, maybe you're looking at target M&A organizations, you want to really understand what that company is doing and how they are impacting, you know, environmental, social, and governance activities. So we're providing the metrics, data, the analytics to help firms assess that and then make the relevant decisions on how they wish to move business forward or how they wish to mitigate any potential risk they see in that space.
And I guess in the past, even up to a few years ago, most businesses, what they would care about is the financial risk, right? Which obviously isn't in ESG, is the financial risk, i.e. do I risk losing my money here, or is it going to be a good earner? But in this element and in this society now, because it's so kind of important in terms of your market profile, you know, the type of business you are, the ethics of your business, which is so important now, rightly, then this is, you're looking at this, aren't you? You're looking at these elements, you know, to create an ethical business, I guess.
Yeah, to create a brand as well, right? Like all of those things, like end of year reports now, they have the financial component, they have a D&I component as well, right? Like what is the makeup of your organization? What does the gender equality look like? What is the racial, like that is part of the profile. And also their environmental, social, and governance activities too, right? Corporate responsibility, impact, etc. So all of these things now are becoming part of the review process for, you know, assessing organizations, assessing their performance, not only financially, but in society as well, right? Like what is their impact that they have, positive or negative? And that's helping to, that is moving the stock prices of organizations.
Yeah, because you can lose a stock price and therefore lose value. So it is money in the end. I guess that's you've got to comes back to that. But I think that's an important thing as well. So when you speak to business leaders that are really thinking about ESG and, you know, those principles and sustainability, what are the best pieces of advice that you can give them? Because I guess this has to be what I've seen from diversity and from ESG and all these different principles, it has to be from the top down, right? You know, you have to, it can't be this team of staff, you go and sit in this room and tell me what you think type thing. It's got to go from the top down, doesn't it?
Yeah, so, you know, the board is involved in this, all the stakeholders are involved in this, and so they're driving you know, the direction of the company, and their clients are also involved in this as well, right? So the investors are saying where, you know, they want to see the reports, they want to see where their money is going to, and who is that benefited and who's lost out from that. So all of these people now are a part of this conversation and part of driving, I guess, the change on that. So, you know, the advice I would say is that one, like constantly monitor the impact that you have. And that goes both internally and externally, right? So whatever is happening within your organization, however you're portraying that, the external factors also play into that as well. So again, come back to the whole supply chain activity, the, you know, what are you investing in? And also who are the vendors that you're using? You know, that has a knock-on effect on your reputation and the brand as well. This space is, I think I've mentioned it, like that's so vast, and so there's so many things you can pick and choose to kind of focus on. I think there's a lot of push politically around environmental awareness. So we're looking at climate change, carbon emissions, greenhouse gas, etc. But there are so many different aspects to ESG that you can align yourself to. You know, whether that's in the social pillar, racial justice, you know, equity, inclusion, whatever it may be, or if you're looking at governance, labor issues, whatever it may be. There's so many opportunities that I think you can become very fuzzy in deciding. You know, to say, no, we work in ESG. Yeah, but what does that mean? Like, what does that mean for you as an organization? Because it's such a broad concept. So I think that as well, like alongside monitoring your activity internally and externally, be very clear about what it is that you're trying to influence and make change on, because it is such a broad subject. And I think, I don't know if you want to talk about it, but greenwashing, like that's a thing that's kind of being propelled to the forefront, and there's a lot of regulation coming out to try to manage and mitigate that as well. So those two things I think will definitely help with that.
And would you say that, if you're looking at your reputational risk, that you should try and focus it into maybe your industry, you should try and keep it, should try and kind of cover everything? Or do you think it's important to, let's say there's 10 different pillars of this, it's better to get 2 really, really good and then move on to the next 2? Or is it important to make sure that you have a principle for each?
I think having a principle for each and a goal is useful, but again, some industries just don't align to certain factors, like
yeah.
I don't think you can do everything, but that's why there's so many different opportunities, I think, that you can align yourself to. So it really does depend on the industry and where you have the most, I guess, opportunity for impact and influence. Maybe that's the way that you align it, but I think everybody has an alignment to E, to S, and to G, but within that, again, there's so many different breakdowns that you literally can't pick all of them. So it depends on your industry and the resources that you have available to you as well, right? That will influence where you put your time and your focus to.
And talk about resources. I mean, do you work with a wide variety of different types of companies? I mean, you can imagine for a big corporate, like a Microsoft or a Goldman Sachs, something like this is really, really important. But for let's say a medium-sized business like GCS, would you still say like this is important stuff now?
Yeah, definitely. I think every organization has a responsibility in this space. So regardless of your size, obviously the larger you are, the more impact you probably have, the more influence you have to impact change, but so do the smaller organizations too, right? And each one of them are penetrating society in some sort of way. So everybody has an opportunity to make a difference. Even in just, I'll give you an example, like me looking for a job, like part of my research on a company was looking at the level of diversity they have in an organization and also what they say that they're doing from an ESG and social corporate responsibility perspective, regardless of how big of an organization you are. So I don't think that should make a difference at all. I think everybody has.
Wherever you are, if you've got one person in a garage, you never know kind of how big you could be in the future. You've got to start off with the right principles, the principles that are right for your business, I guess. And that's it. And that's kind of going back to that, we're talking about diversity. And I'm just really, really interested about your comment about the performing arts and computer sciences, right? Because I reckon you were the only person in your university. I reckon you might be the only person, maybe even in the country, right, has ever done this. But we talk a lot about, and coming back to, opening up computer sciences to different, types of people that are not your normal people to get into computer sciences. So were you doing performing arts first and then made a conscious decision that I think this is, or were you interested in both, or how did that come about? Because
I've been interested in both. Like I was really good at math at school, and I also enjoyed dancing and singing and whatever else I could do to like shake about. So throughout school, I was always doing both of those things. And then A levels, I believe, I did. IT was one of them, and then the other was performing arts and math. And then I thought at that point, like, I'm going to university, I have to pick a side, right? Like I have to pick a side. I'm either become a professional dancer or I'm going to become something to do with like computers. And then I found my university where they had an offer to do both. I was like, brilliant, don't have to choose that. So I just went down that route again. So where I haven't had to make like an actual like deviation, I've just kept them both side by side as long as possible. Obviously, like the performing arts side of things probably has a shorter lifespan and maybe not as lucrative from a financial perspective. And I think that also it's just so much more involvement, like if you have to rehearse and like the physical impact on your body is a lot, whereas financial services or even just computing is very different, right? And so there's probably a lot more financial gain for myself that I can maybe invest into certain other things. So those sorts of thoughts had come into my mind, like as I started to get into the career like mindset and think, you know, what do I actually want for my future? And so the performing arts became more of a hobby, but I do perform at work, you know.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, I'm in front of clients and I'm doing presentations and I'm at conferences and speaking, you know, on behalf of companies or, you know, communities or whatever it may be, and all of that is a performance. So I feel like I'm still able to embed the two together, but you know, one of them brings me joy and the other one brings me joy and some cash.
Yeah. And it's just quite interesting because we talk a lot about education, you know, and we obviously talk, like, you know, we're a technology recruitment agency, and we say quite a lot. I have 25 years recruitment experience that, you know, due to the CVs that we see and the contacts that we make and the networks that we have, you know, 90% probably of the people that I've placed in my career, and I see that GCS is placing, are probably a male, you know, and that's the gender divide. But obviously when they kind of look at the kind of social background as well, which we do quite a lot of work on now, partly due to ESG, but secondly because we think it's a really important thing to know the data so that you can try to affect the data, which obviously is what RepRisk do, but we've got to do our own data. But it would be interesting then to think, like, why don't they do more mixed courses with computer sciences? Because I would assume that, you know, like you said, there's one person doing that one course, which is crazy, really, isn't it? But you know what I mean, I did French and English, right? So French and English always goes well together, you know, and probably people put it in the same thing, right? But why not do computer sciences and English literature? You know, obviously it doesn't really go together, but at the same time, like, I think in America they do a lot more mixed. They do a lot more mixed degrees, don't they? So it's not like just a single stream.
I'm not sure actually about American education. I know they focus a lot on sports and stuff like that, but I'm not even sure. But yeah, like I said, the university that I went to literally had this matrix of all, you know, types of things that you could like combine together, and I'd never seen that on an application before. I think there are some that allow you to do the joint honors, but the alignment is a lot more closer. But you know, we talk about diversity and diversity of thought, and I think that is a perfect example of being able to kind of utilize that. Like, you know, we all have the left and right brain, but some of them are like me and just in the middle and just do all sorts of stuff. You know, why not be able to tap into both types of different ways of thinking in one individual, which is why things like diversity is so important, because if you've just got someone who focuses in one area and focus on another area, how do you kind of marry those two together? You've got to bring them together, right? So I'm all for people choosing your degrees and seeing how they kind of, you know, it will definitely help you in life in some sort of way.
Yeah, your mind's not set at 18, is it? You know, it's not like, you know, and also they talk a lot about the, you know, like you just mentioned there, like sales for us. I mean, we've had some amazing recruitment agents in our business, recruitment consultants in our business, just who are ex, you know, people on the stage, like James's not even doing the degree. Like, you know, they tried to make it on the West End, didn't make it on the West End. Well, I'll be a recruitment consultant, which unfortunately is a way lots of people get into recruitment. We've got a lot of ex-professional footballers as well, you know. So that's the kind of the way, you know. I think is the way you go if you can't find a proper job. But there you go, you find other people proper jobs. But
they're all transferable skills, right, into other aspects.
Totally, but it is vocational, you know. And I think that's the thing that people forget. Like, you look at computer science, well, that's a vocational thing. You'll become a programmer, and then you're going to get a job. Whereas, you know, performing arts or something, the skills you learn are vocational, aren't they? They do help you to do your job well. It's just it's not necessarily recognized in the same sort of way. And I think it's definitely something that, let's give a shout out to the university, Maryse. Who is this university?
Oxford Brookes.
Oxford Brookes, fantastic. Well, there you go, you know. And you got to do it in the Dreaming Spires as well, which is a nice kind of part of the world to do it in. So. Good stuff. Now, obviously, talking about technology, obviously, you know, a lot of what you do and what you've done before is obviously linking in with data and technology that drive ESG and drive, you know, diversity. You know, for yourself, why is data so important? Why is it important to have a basis in technology when you're doing these more social kind of elements?
Well, I mean, the data is the only way really that you can measure change, isn't it? Like, I don't think, I mean, I know it's wrong, but that is the way that you are measuring change. So we've all, you know, the more data we have, the more historical information that we have, we can, one, see what the impact has been so far, and then we can also potentially predict what we may see in the future, and maybe even come up with new algorithms or processes that will help change and put things in a better direction. So all of that is driven of information that is to be shared, to be enhanced, to be analyzed in various different ways. So I think that the impact of both that and then the combination of technology alongside that, and then things like visualization tools, and there's so many different ways of kind of, you know, assessing information. It's truly fundamental to any of these things. If you look at the subject of diversity and inclusion, right? Like, the first challenge that a lot of organizations had was that they didn't know who was in their organization. They had no idea. They hadn't collected any information about the ethnicity, the sexual orientation, the makeup of their employees, to say, like, this is who we have on, you know, this group and that group, and this is where we need to see improvements. And how do you set milestones if you don't have underlying data to check your kind of progression and your improvements? So it is an absolutely fundamental component.
And then one thing I always think is that people shouldn't be put off by where they're starting, I guess, you know, because if you do your diversity data, and I have seen some diversity data, and you're like, oh my God, this is just terrible, we're never going to do this, you know. I guess it's small steps, it's incremental, isn't it? You know, you have to move forward, even if your starting position is basically zero, right?
Oh yeah, I think there was a lot of firms that were like very shamed about where their starting number zero was, but fine. Like, you know, a lot of people, this hadn't been at the forefront of many organizations' mind. And if you're thinking about growth and you're thinking about attracting and retaining talent, these are now things that you need to think about. So how you have to measure that, you have to start from some point, and maybe it's zero, maybe it's 5%, maybe it's 15%, but you know, you have to start somewhere. So I mean, it's just, if you're on zero, then you probably have to move a lot quicker than you are if you're at 40.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. It's an interesting. And do you grade that at RepRisk? Is there a kind of, you know, an optimum point that you think organizations should be at? And if you say like a zero, then it should be 100 type thing.
I mean, it's interesting because it really depends on that organization as well, right? Because geographical presence also impacts the level of diversity that you can have within an organization. So if you're based in, I don't know, somewhere like London, which is a culturally diverse organization, you expect to see that from any company here, and also the employees and the types of firms that they're doing business with. So you expect to see that. Whereas if you're maybe in like, I don't know,
St. Ives, like I was last week. So yeah,
Cornwall. Cornwall. Or just somewhere where there isn't, like, as a country, there isn't that much ethnic diversity, or you know, you've got issues surrounding sexual orientation. Like, people probably won't come forward and say what their sexual orientation is. You won't have those metrics. So it really depends on like the region that you're operating in, and your global reach as to what is expected of you as an organization, and what can be expected as an organization. But there's always room for diversity. I don't think like you can have the same types of people at every level within an organization it's expected to flourish and grow. You've got to bring in diversity of thought from, you know, wherever you can get it from, really.
Yeah, that's right. And with different viewpoints about the other things, like within the ESG pillars. I'm just quite interested. I read an article last week where I think, you know, one of the big things, the big target numbers has obviously been, you know, female members of FTSE boards, FTSE 100 boards. And I did read that it was kind of getting to more of an equal level in the last year or so. So let's say it's like between 30 to 40%, whereas before it was 10. You know, obviously it's made a move, and, you know, that it should be 50-50, and that should happen at some point, you know, with the trajectory over those time. Do you think, you know, some of the organizational things that you've been involved in LSG, you know, I think the kind of Black women leaders, different kind of group. Do you think things like that have really kept the focus on those types of conversations and helped us to kind of get to this point where there is more, there is more diversity at the top table, as it were?
Yeah, I think, there's change that gets driven from the top down, but then there's also change that gets driven from the employees up, right? So those organizations, or those, I guess, employee networks are there to really provide a platform and provide information throughout the organization to say, like, where are the challenges? Like, why aren't we seeing more leaders in these positions? And they can give you like the honest opinion from the ground as to why I didn't go forward for that, or why I didn't get that, or why I think I didn't get that, or what has been the challenges that I've personally faced in career development. So having those types of employee groups, I think, are really kind of fundamental in understanding like the culture of your organization and generally what people think it's like to work there, and whether they feel that there's longevity in their stay, and if there is opportunity, and if not, if you're losing talent, that's where it's going to happen first, right? You kind of often see entry level, there's a great deal of diversity, but as you climb the ladder, it starts to fade off. And so you need to ask those people, why are you leaving? What can we do better as an organization?
Yeah, no, that's really, really, really interesting. And, I guess that's kind of how, having more senior people kind of come through who are kind of aspirational and have a senior viewpoint within the business allows other people to have people that they look up to. Which I'm assuming within your organizations, people look up to yourself, Maryse, and think, I could be like, how do you deal with that? If people kind of, that's that kind of like buddy and mentor thing, do you accept, do you welcome that? Do you like it? Is it something you think is important to do? Or
I think it's important to do. Oftentimes I'm just like, oh, someone else, but I don't know. I can't. Yeah, I don't know. But I would say it is extremely important, and I do very much value it. And sometimes I don't really realize like how impactful I have been in certain situations. So I often have friends and colleagues remind me like, no, you have done a great job and you should be doing X, Y, and Z. So I don't know, I kind of just do things and wander on with my life. So when there are people like entry into the organization who want my time or guidance, I'm always happy to give it to them, because you learn off other people. And I think it's important to give people access to those that they, either feel inspired by or influenced by in a positive way. I think giving them access to yourself is really beneficial for their own personal and also their career development. So I always try to do that when I can.
Yeah, fantastic. And I think obviously again, a lot of the leader series always talk about humility. You should be that sort of person. It's like, oh no, it's fine. I've done anything special, because I think that kind of comes across well as a leader as well, doesn't it? It's like, well, of course you speak, I'm special.
Like. I'm just like, I just did this thing the other day. It's fine. Like, that was a big thing, and I was like,
So to kind of bring the kind of conversation to a close, the thing we always ask is, about kind of, the most important things you've learned as a leader. But I guess, you could put this in the context of speaking to people that are starting their kind of career, and wanting to, make changes and grow within their career. So what was the most important things you've learned on your journey as a leader in the last, since you started, basically?
So I think one of the things I've always done is I've always said yes. And I think if I've had the capacity to do something, I'm going to do it, because I'm going to learn, right? I'm going to learn. I'm probably going to meet a new person. I'm going to expand my network in some sort of way, and it will be beneficial to me and hopefully somebody else at some point in the future. So that's always kind of been my thought process. And I think because of that, I've just been able to have such a variety of opportunities like throughout my career so far, because I've said yes to things that have kind of come my way. And it may not have been something on my radar, but if someone had thought me a good candidate for something, or to help out in a certain situation, or lend my voice to something, like I always have tried to do that, because you just don't know, you never know what's going to come off this situation. So that would be my first piece of advice. If you've got the capacity to do it, then just do it. Like do it, try it, give it a period of time, roll out if it's not working for you, but you'll definitely learn and benefit from it in some sort of way. And the second thing I think as well is I don't know, like as I've kind of grown older and I've kind of got through my career, the importance of stuff like mindfulness and well-being. I've always been, you know, a very healthy and I think well-rounded individual, but the last few years, particularly in the US, like that practice of mindfulness and kind of not being distracted by outside noise and remaining focused on your goal and what you're trying to achieve and what you're trying to achieve for other people, that mindfulness like really does help kind of keep you sane and keep you grounded and keep you focused. And that's, I think, as a leader, like you want people who are going to be like that, right? There's nothing worse than a very erratic individual who can't handle change or can't handle conflict or whatever it may be. So that practice of mindfulness, I think, really does help you become a better person, but also a better leader too.
Fantastic. Well, Maryse, it's been great to speak to you, and I wish you well in your new opportunity, the new thing you said yes to. I'm sure it'll be a great success. And yeah, no, thank you very much for your time there and some really interesting subjects. So thank you very much, Maryse, and have a good day.